On Insightful Inspiration, Isabelle Landreville chats with a mosaic of brilliant individuals that help shape the insights industry. We live stream episodes to LinkedIn, and you can listen on all major podcast networks. Join us, and please subscribe so you won't miss our guests' insightful inspiration and hear what drives them and how they get inspired to be successful in the insights industry and beyond. Insightful Inspiration is brought to you by Sylvester & Co., an award-winning qualitative research firm with half a century of experience.
Welcome back to Insightful Inspiration, where we spotlight bold thinkers shaping the future of insights. I'm your host, Isabelle Landreville, the proud owner of Sylvester & Co. Now, in this episode, we're in for a treat. I am joined by Deidre Sullivan, a rare blend of strategist, award-winning poet, and comedy producer. I know, very exciting. She has led leadership roles at insights and strategy agencies like Flamingo Halls and Partner, as well as leading brand strategy at the Upright Citizens Brigade, the iconic home of improv and sketch comedy. Deidre's background spans stand-up and improv comedy, branded content, future film writing, and years of insights leadership, and given her a unique perspective on what makes communication lands. So together we'll explore why great research isn't enough anymore. It has to be presented in a way that grabs attention, builds connection, and inspires action. Words matter. You've heard me say that before. So from cadence to clarity, from humor and emotion, this episode is all about how we learn from poets, comics, and creatives to better present and activate our insights. Welcome to the show, Deidre.
Hi, Isabelle. Thank you so much. It is so great to be here with you today.
It sure is great. I think I'm so excited. I think your unique background, I always say we sell brains and personalities. And I think what shapes that is very much our background and our sort of career portfolios up to a certain point. So I think you're very much, we're in for a treat with what you have to offer here. So thank you. Yeah, I think that's going to be great. So how about we get started here? So just one to kick us off, and then we'll take it from there. We've all, I think you and I have both either given our share of presentation, seen our share of presentations. Can you tell me about a time when excellent research fell flat just because of poor presentation?
You know, it's really hard because I think, the insights industry is filled with some of the most brilliant, creative, passionate people I've ever met. Like, insights people tend to be really gifted. So for a presentation to go flat, something really needs to go wrong. And, I think a lot of it is thinking about presentation as a final destination versus presentation as a process. And, like, comedians rehearse and practice to get their 5 minutes. I think the idea of thinking about presentation as a process should start with the day you get the brief.
Mm-hmm.
How do you relate to the client? What do how do you communicate? How do you connect? And I think, the fundamentals of project management, once you land that brief, really can anchor the client in a sense of joy, collaboration, adventure, journey. So when you get to the presentation stage, it's not like, oh my God, we have to present.
Yeah.
More like they're part of the entire process and are very excited. So like, I'm a real advocate of, strong project management and really leaning into how the client likes to be communicated with.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think another issue, Isabelle, is the idea of, presentation and knowing your audience, because, every client wants to take this, at least I've seen this, wants to take it up a notch, wants to take it to the next level, hopefully to the C-suite, hopefully activate those insights throughout the enterprise. So a lot of times there are people on the call who are bored, worrying about when they're picking up their kids from soccer, what's going to happen next, where's my coffee, what's going on. And, I think it's important to really know who exactly you're speaking to. And I don't mean just looking at their LinkedIn, which everyone does to get briefed, but really knowing have they written a book? Have they given a speech? What do they care about? And really thinking about that audience before you go in and knowing how to present to them. That always helps. And, going the extra mile, we can talk about that later, I hope, what it takes to really build in something fantastic into a presentation, which I have a thought about.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other thing is about emotional connection.
Tell me.
I think as we all embrace new AI tools, as we all use AI to organize, to pull verbatims, to do this, to build a synthetic audience, to have a thought partner. I think we run the risk of an incredibly gifted group of people getting so commoditized. And so where does that human element come in? I mean, everyone's talking about the human AI combination. That's fine. But I think we as human beings have a responsibility to anchor ourselves in our own humanity and not let our creative and intuitive tool sets be.
Yeah.
So,
I feel it puts even greater, is it pressure, opportunity, half, glass half full, half empty. But I feel it's a brilliant time to be a fabulous and sharp critical thinker.
I'm so interested that you're saying that because I think in these times it's easier not to be, especially as people are using AI for thought partners. We all consume so much content, but how much do we exercise that muscle of internal creativity? That's why I'm an advocate for every senior and junior executive to take a poetry workshop, a 2-hour session to learn how to be more creative and spontaneous and trust that. Same thing with improv workshops, getting teams to learn how to collaborate with one another, feel free, change energy. It's a muscle. It might not be applicable all the time, but it should be exercised. And I think it's easy just to let it drift as we have all these tools.
Yeah. And it's also easy to, I think the more you use, it's like the more you use a calculator, the less you can add up, sort of just
That's
do
a
mental
that's
math.
a
I think
great point.
perfect parallel, either because you don't feel the need to, there's no ego in it. I think ego saves a lot. Not misplaced ego, well placed, well curated, elegant ego, as my grandmother would say. This notion of showing up for yourself in the right way, like type
Yeah.
of ego, which is, no, there's pride in being able to do it. And maybe it's not perfect, but it's me. Like I think there's a bit of confidence in it too. I think perfection now suddenly exists these days, which I think AI is part of, which I think is kind of where I'm coming in with. I think it's a brilliant time to be a critical thinker and say, hey, let's try this, but let's make sure we don't lose sight of our final destination. What, like, the success is still ours and still owned by us. Let's not delegate everything because that sounds good. Which,
Well, I think to delegate is to commoditize and to run that risk because so
yeah.
many really good insights agencies are sounding alike in their presentations.
Yeah.
And I think we need to remind ourselves that we are thinkers. We are, more importantly, feeling people, and we can make intuitive leaps and come up with brilliant strategic thinking that a machine cannot.
Yeah, and I think I think because a machine doesn't have context, it doesn't factor in context. So knowing your audience, like as much as you can prompt it and be smart in your prompting, I think there's still this notion of emotional connect and client management and building that trusting relationship from the get-go. I do think though there's some to build off your like what can make it go wrong. I think what happens if, so I think there's two things in insights, and I'd love to hear your take on this. One is, what happens when you have to deliver bad news? Does that kind of change your approach in making sure a story lands properly?
Well, I don't think bad news should be new news. I mean, if there is bad news, the client should know all the way through that we're getting bad news and this isn't looking good and you guys are,
Okay.
so there are no surprises.
Yeah. Okay. So, but I think good news shouldn't be a surprise either. Like I do remember, I remember over dinner at one point a fellow like a friend, but inside director saying, I worked with this one and she really wanted to do a ta-da kind of reveal. I'm like, I don't want a public reveal. I don't want to be in a meeting with my superior and the people I manage and getting surprised by something. Like that is the worst thing you could probably do, which I think good news or bad news to your point.
I completely agree, and that gets back to the client as collaborator and the process as collaboration. So the final or one of the, when you present, that's just part of the process, no
Yeah.
surprises.
Yeah. And so has it ever happened to you where, because it's a learning journey, right? And so you set your goals, you have an objective, you have learning objectives, but there's something fabulous if it's a collaborative journey. It's a shared learning journey. At one point, you're like, oh, but now we know all of this. And then it gets to snowball and they want more. And you're like, oh, well, that's out of scope. Well, this is something else, or there's something else. Have you encountered that? Which is, they don't, they're kind of like, they go out of scope just because the learnings are so great. The enthusiasm sort of gets the better of them.
Well, I think that gets into pricing and project management, and of course, how to communicate with clients. I think every client I've ever had the privilege of working with understands when scope starts to go in another direction. And you just sit down and have the talk saying, do you want us to pursue this? How can we do this? And talk about the budget in a really logical way. Should we push it to the next quarter? How do we handle this? Because everybody knows this happens, so we work it out.
Yeah.
It's about having a conversation. And I think a lot of juniors tend to get really nervous talking about money. And I always felt it was important on my part in working with juniors to help them do that, help them know how to have those conversations, because it's the normal part of business.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. But I think it's interesting. We sort of headed out with words matter, presentations, and we're not talking about design. We're not talking about the structure of the PowerPoint. We're not talking about Canvas or whatnot. We're talking about client management. You're talking about managing expectations and how to collaborate successfully. I think that's really interesting.
I think it's essential. And I mean, I bet if we just called the top 10 insights, well, maybe the 30 top insights companies in the world, and took a look at their creds, I'd say most of them look alike. And, that's a problem. It's an expectation. It's like a commodification. So how do you communicate in new and different ways also raises the issue of how do you activate those insights for different audiences? So
yeah. And it's interesting because, having been in insights for quite a number of years, to not put a digit on it, but there's something about, well, you can't say trust me, because that's the first way of having someone doubt you and not trust you, not want to trust you. That's the worst thing you could do. But there is also this notion of, I can give you a sneak peek, but you're really not going to completely know, because all the projects I do are qual and custom. And so I can't give you an example of what necessarily the outcome will be. I can't give you an example of a report. I can't share with you because I signed too many NDAs. So it's interesting to sell research as well, and sell qualitative research and sell the journey, because people do need to sort of go, okay, this is a leap, or we're going to impart with you. So collaboration is a big, big part of it as well because of that, I think.
absolutely. Completely agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So so client management aside, from a presentation standpoint, so if we really anchor it in debrief kind of moment or workshop or whatever, but in the presentation, what can you go, if you're sitting there, where does it go? Oh, this is going to go wrong, or this is going to slide, or this is assuming client management out of the equation in the moment.
I hope you never have that moment, Isabelle, in the presentation where, oh my God, it's like, oh, now it's going wrong. What do we do?
But what are some telling signs? Like when I coach junior, because you're talking about juniors, when I coach people on my team, I'm like, well, if you have that question, if you have that person at that point, or maybe this is going to happen, under index this, over index this. This is how you recoup if you're losing. There's a few things to read a room that I tend to sort of, is there anything on your end?
I think it varies. I think whether you're doing it live in a conference room or doing it on Zoom where people are totally distracted and again, planning to pick up their children from soccer. I think I'm more a believer of focusing on being comfortable in emotional uncertainty. And feeling the client, going in with deep feeling for the client's both narrative and the client's struggle. And, we talked about comedy a little bit up front. You mentioned, I strongly advocate, do not try to be funny. Try to be vulnerable. Be vulnerable, because vulnerability is the basis, of course, comedy, because all comedy is struggle. But that lesson totally applies to presentations. Understand the client's vulnerability in terms of the brand. Understand your own vulnerability in terms of presenting. Be authentic. If you don't know something, say you don't know, and you'll get right back to them within the next day. And would you like an additional just be helpful, be kind, know who you are, and get through it. That's what I would tell a junior.
And when you say own your vulnerability, I feel like that's a junior's worst mistake, like worst nightmare, because that's like, what do I do with that? What does that translate into?
Well, I think it translates into, if you're feeling nervous, perhaps acknowledge it.
Mm,
If it's your first presentation and it's an honor, maybe say it if it's the kind of client who would like that. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
If you've never done this before, perhaps say that. Like things that make people want to root for you, because I think people all want to root. They want to root for the comedian on the stage, and they want to root for the person who's junior presenting. They want them to do a
Yeah.
good job.
Okay. Fair enough. And what would you say to someone who says, but aren't I losing or damaging my credibility if I
Oh,
say that?
we're all human beings.
Well, what happens to I'm a different generation than the people starting off right now, but I mean, what happens to like fake it until you make it type of thing?
I think that's a lot of nonsense.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, do a good job, show up,
Yeah.
don't wear your pajamas to work, like do the right thing,
Hmm.
be smart, be prepared, have rehearsed, be, like all that.
Yeah.
But it's not easy sometimes for younger people to present.
Yeah, but I think it's also do the work.
Do
Like
the work, yeah.
there's no shortcut to getting a seat at the table. Like you have to like show up properly, you have to practice, you have to have a tone of voice, you have to like there's work involved. Like you need to prep, you need to practice, you need
Yeah.
to
And a
yeah.
lot of that is tactical. A lot of that is preparation and tactical. Things like emotional connection, being comfortable with uncertainty, that more comes also from practice, but it's more on the emotional side. And
Mm.
that's where I think things like improv workshops can help people a lot.
In what way?
Well, improv workshops teach you to be in the moment, teach you to be collaborative, teach you to understand the power of yes and get you going. I mean, at UCB, we developed workshops for all sorts of people who were having incredible communication challenges, like Democratic candidates and their staffers. Like we trained them in improv so they would know how to change the energy in the room, know how to deal with a really tough question, know how to bring joy where there might be strife. So those kind of tools can be applied to some of the situations you were describing before. And that comes from some improv training. And
Mhm.
there's so much merit for teams doing a 2-hour workshop and then trying out some of those tools. So, things like that have value in the long run for building that collaborative muscle, that freedom that young people and senior leaders should have when presenting to go with the
Mhm.
flow.
Yeah, and I think the improv teaches you to, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but teaches you to listen. Like be in the
Totally.
moment, listen to the end, yes, kind of thing, or build. You're not thinking of what you should be building off of or answering or what's next because it might change, right? So you have to listen
That's
carefully.
such a beautiful point. And I think we're all guilty. I know I'm guilty of you're listening to someone thinking what you want to say next. And you're not really listening, like you're saying, do you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
versus being right there in that collaborative moment and just having that skill is huge and will hugely impact your presentation abilities.
Yeah. And I think knowing your presentation, like I was in a
Mm.
presentation at a C-suite at 9 o'clock on the snowstorm, kind of Monday morning kind of situation, and like the classic. Um, and then it was interesting how questions, like they're engaged, enthusiastic. They're sitting on the edge of, like they're leaning in. You know how a room leans in, even like if they're in person and online. And I'm like, they're leaning in. We're there. I think it's awesome. And then there's great questions that are because leaning in and engagement leads to really good questions from the top people. And so questions are pretty big and sort of, thought provoking. It's really interesting how at one point during this entire thing, we had a quant part, we had a qual part. I'm
Yep.
a qualie, so I was qual. And it's
Mm.
really interesting how I had only 4 slides to present. I started with the end because I always start with the end. I never sort of journey for a debrief. I'm like, this is the end result. Let me unpack it type of thing. That's always how I do it. So I was like, this is kind of the end, and let's unpack that. And I only presented one slide after, because the questions were so smart and so high level that I just sat there and just answered the questions and then said, you know what? I think let's just skip to this slide. Let's talk to this slide and then let's go.
Right.
The conversation was much better because I knew the content, and the team was
Fabulous.
really, I think that, so having a conversation and I think sharing a story is where the magic happens. It's not the freaking slides. Enough with the slides, I say, but maybe that's just me.
Well, I think it sounds to me like you're skilled and gifted enough to flex on your feet and like move to what was the right thing to do that
Mhm.
one slide. And that sounds fabulous. Don't think lots of juniors are going to do that, but it
Yeah.
sounds like amazing. You have that improv muscle, clearly.
But I think it's also make sure you're not married to your slides.
I think for a senior person, definitely.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
listening to the room. I
Mhm.
I also wanted to go back for a second, Isabelle, to the idea of vulnerability in a presentation and give you
Yeah.
2 examples where I've seen it built in beautifully, very specifically.
Go.
A couple of years ago, my team had to work with a financial institution that was in trouble over race. And so we team members on the team who they were empowered to speak directly to what it meant to them. That was in
Mm,
the slides, that was in the presentation,
yeah.
and it gave the client a lot of comfort to see the deep emotional impact that it had on our team and how much it resonated with them. We also worked with a church, and we were comfortable in our presentation talking about the power of prayer,
Mhm.
talking about what it meant to us, and why we think this is so critically important, what they were asking us to work on. So
Mhm.
that I don't think is such a common choice in slides,
Yeah.
but we did it, and
Yeah.
it worked.
Yeah, but I think it's really so it's interesting. So all of this, I had someone on my team who, I forget how she joined my team, to be quite honest. This is years ago. But her impact was amazing.
Mhm.
She's a librarian. She has I think at that point, she hadn't done her master's yet. So she was a lit major, an English lit major, but
Mhm.
like just a storyteller. And this is going to probably tap in, like strike a chord with you. You tell me. But so when I started briefing her for her to help me write the decks and the stories, I basically said, so how do you build your stories? Like what works to her? So I just started like, what's your language? What are your proxies? Like how I was trying to find a shorthand of how to tap into her English lit background and how her kind of brain was wired to sort of fit, okay, business writing, PowerPoint, like how can we, like, what's our shorthand? And it was really interesting how her impact was immenseful on our team and our entire company because she created a resident storyteller position that we
Cool.
then hired for. But she kind of was the first one because I'd sit down next to her and then we would draw out something because I'm a very visual thinker and so
Mhm.
was she. So we'd map out something and we'd say, she'd ask questions like, who's the antagonist? What's the tension? Like your basic like story sort of or screenplay kind of what's the magic element, the first within 15 minutes there's something that happens in every single movie. Like there's just that hierarchy and that really I think trained me
Mm.
to figure out what the key messages are and what's the business challenge. Like the antagonist became the business challenge and then like just mapping that to business, which I thought was really interesting, and I think that flipped the switch for me and really was a defining moment.
It sounds really impactful. It sounded like it had a lot of impact on you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your background in script writing and so forth and screenwriting, did that and humor, did that actually have an impact in how you tell a story in a business world, in the insights world?
I don't lean so much to story as I think you might, Isabel. I don't really think about it that much in terms of presentation. I like to be more elastic, I think,
Mm.
and I don't always use story as like a guardrail.
Okay.
Um, I think more along the lines of emotional connection, frameworks, elasticity, that kind of thing. So it's not really an area like I've really been married to. So no.
Okay. So what's your go-to kind of secret sauce, let's say?
I don't think I have a secret sauce. I always have a wonderful team, and maybe that's the secret sauce, and have been privileged enough in my career to work with some of the most gifted semioticians, applied data scientists, qual researchers, and we all have worked really hard together to come up with ways to flex in and be really creative for clients. Some clients don't need traditional qual, particularly if it's with a really sensitive audience, like
Mm,
people who are struggling with health issues or who are impoverished, or even at the other end, high net worth individuals need a different kind of care. So, flexing into different things, and that perhaps is a secret sauce, but it's not mine, it's the team's.
mm. I feel like I'm listening to you. I feel like you need empathy to convey empathy.
I think in all matters of life you do.
Yeah, I feel like almost your clients become your first primary research targets.
Well, I think to get to know them for sure and understand deeply what they need, what they want, how they like to be communicated with, things like that, for sure, for sure. And they want to do a good job. They want to shine. We all want to shine, don't we?
Of course. Yeah. So at the intersect of, this notion of being an insights leader, also an award-winning poet, you've worked with hundreds of comedians. You've tapped into it. I want to tap into that and say, can you tell me a bit about a time in these worlds that how you led that into insights? Like, what have you learned from those fields that you're bringing into research and your insights leadership role?
Well, I think there's like tactical lessons and applications, and then there's also the all the emotional lessons we were talking about before,
Hmm.
and letting that intuitive, creative, even dare I say spiritual muscle atrophy, because it's so critical to analysis. Analysis by itself is nothing unless our human spirit is there and our intuition is unlocking and being comfortable with what might be possible. And that's like a very broad thing, but I really believe it. I think like a good example of where these two worlds have married and been unusually put together was like one time, Univision came to me with a box of quantitative data, and they were like, "This is boring. What do we do?"
Okay.
I'm like, "Okay," and looked at it and decided help them. I produced a comedy show for them at Advertising Week where we blew up 60-foot slides with all this data about, Latino television viewing and medical issues and home things and favorite shows, telenovela. And we cast it with comedians from Comedy Central and HBO. And it was really wonderful. And the audience, which in a way were all stakeholders for their advertisers at Advertising Week, and we had over 400 people in the audience. It was a wonderful evening. Then we took it on the road a bit, and it was fun, and people were having beer and laughing and kind of remembered, I think, like the insights in a new way.
Yeah.
So it's a good example, I think, of activation and marrying comedy to insights.
Yeah. Wow. Any other examples of like just a out of the box way of sharing insights that really land and have an impact like that?
I've done roundtables for big tech clients and others where they're interested in exploring an issue. So creating like a custom roundtable on issues, one for a top 10 tech company on the issue of what it means to be a fully dimensional human being. So, a couple of partners and I from Holland Partners, and I just did a roundtable with a semiotician who's very versed in that topic and an academic, and explored it in depth.
Yeah.
And I think people had fun. Those are easier to set up, and those I think are more common. But I think, bringing to life insights with comedy is perhaps a little more out of the box and out there.
Yeah, it's definitely entertaining.
Yeah, I think people had a
Yeah,
good time.
I think it's a lot of fun. Is there something about rhythm and tone? Because comedy, so you know what my husband used to do. I think he always says comedy has a music to it and the written to it. Not everybody has it. It depends on probably, well, you're the expert, but is there a tone of voice? Is there a rhythm? Is there something to that?
Well, there is, and that gets into a lot of issues. Like, how long does it take to become a comedian or become a comedian people want to see?
Okay, tell me more about that.
Comedians, like for stand-up, it could take 10 years before you really feel your feet on stage and you're comfortable in any room and you can just walk on stage and know what you need to do, know how to improvise, know how to go back into your set, finish your set, open strong, end strong, things like that. They're really things that take time. Know how to pull material out that might work in a given moment, which might not be in your set. All this takes a lot of practice.
Yeah, and not everybody's good at crowd work. I have, because of what my husband used to do, I've saw a lot of, there's some comedians that are really good at crowd work for some reason, and some are really good at sticking to a script.
And I think crowd work usually is exponentially more funny because it's so in the moment.
Yeah.
And that is a lesson from improv. I mean, that's where stand-up gets improvisational,
Yeah.
but that is a lesson and something that people who are presenting can learn by being really in the moment. That's what improv can teach you.
Yeah.
And that's a great muscle to build. I think tone of voice, pacing for comedy takes a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And a lot of willingness to really embrace who you are because every comedian is different. So the more comfortable you are with your center and who you are on stage, the better. So I would just say for juniors is to practice for your presenting, be authentic, take an improv class, perhaps even take a poetry class, not a full scale like 10 classes, just a 2 class.
Yeah.
Be comfortable improvising with yourself. So yeah, I definitely think it's an individual thing around authenticity.
Yeah, and I think it's about owning up to who you are and what you can do. I think you can still improve, you can refine, but I think if you are who you are, I mean, at one point, and like I have some people, some teams that you're like, you know what, that's a great fit. They're having fun, I'm having fun. It gels, going back to maybe collaboration and whatnot. And I've had teams where you go, you know what? We're not like, you're not enjoying this. I'm not like, maybe it's not a great fit. Let me introduce you to someone else. Like, I think there's a fit as well on a team. Have you experienced that?
Fit on a team. That is
Like,
such an interesting question when someone doesn't fit well.
well, fit with a client. I'm not saying
Oh, fit with a client.
fit,
That's a good
like
one.
fit with a client. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like I'm looking because we're 12 of us, and it's interesting how, and even like I'm the third generation, so I was someone's retirement plan, Julie Sylvester's retirement plan. It's interesting how there's some clients I was able to, there's some clients I wasn't able to because we're not the same person.
Hmm.
And I think it was interesting as well to own up to that and say, what, she's fabulous, she's magical, I have something else to offer. My clients don't necessarily ask the same thing, expect the same thing. Our brains don't work the same way, but there's like a spirit test that makes us on brand. So everybody on my team is kind of on brand, but brings their own thing, which is great because there's no competition. But like Valentine doesn't attract the same kind of mandates or clients. Clary doesn't either. Like there's different sort of fits. Have you experienced that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a human question in all parts of life. Like, what is the right sport for us? What's the right class for us? Who's the right friend? So it's like, it sounds like you're very sensitive to issues of matching clients to team to team. And yeah, I think that sensitivity is really great.
But I think it makes the story land more easily because everybody is feeling more safe and comfortable because to be themselves. That's what my experience. So going back to, shortening the 10 years it might take you to be on stage as a stand-up, like shortening that a bit more and sort of giving people that might be a little bit more junior a bit of an edge earlier on.
I
I
think
think casting makes a huge difference.
casting's huge.
Yeah.
But it goes back before story, there's relationship. And,
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Like so this is episode 31. I've been at this for really, I think that is like new news to everybody who's been listening. I think we've always thought, like we've always talked about reverse engineering. We've always talked about like the end justifies the means and all of that. But I think this notion of making a story land and making a presentation successful ties back to client management and sort of relationship management, I think is a first. Thank you. That's
Oh,
awesome.
I think it's a fundamental. I think it makes it
Yeah.
less scary. There are things that are in your control, and that is how you organize things and how structured you are. I'm not a particularly structured person, but I love structure.
I like systems. I love to create systems that require no willpower.
Cool.
I am the poster kid for atomic habits. I am lazy, like sit on my butt,
Really?
will rack my brain thinking about a way of making something simpler to get up and do.
Got
I
it.
will spend more energy thinking about the system to make it simpler than to actually so I'm very frustrating to doers.
You sound fun, Isabelle.
So lazy mother of all inventions, maybe lazy, I don't know, but yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like systems. But so casting is kind of a good one, interesting to really because and I'm bringing this up because we're running into an interesting time in the insights industry. Whereas, online virtual presentations like we're doing here versus in person, not the same skill set. I don't think you feel rapport quite the same way. You don't manage like a client the same way. But I think you don't read the room the same way, definitely. I think there's also the fact that we're running into like, if you want someone who's got like 5 to 6 years of experience at doing this, they don't exist because of COVID. Because we weren't like in Canada, we weren't doing things live or in person for almost 2 years.
Hmm.
So if they've got 2 years of experience, maybe 3 years of experience, or they've got 8, 9, but there's like that sweet spot of like 5 to 7
Mhm.
that just doesn't exist, which I think is interesting.
Well, I think that's, of course, a function of what we have been dealing with. We've been dealing with COVID, of course. Yeah.
But so I think that's why I think how can we shorten that sort of I'm using 10 years because that's kind of it doesn't mean it's 10 years, but how can we shorten that sort of that 10 years and how can we help our junior people kind of own a room and read a room and sort of show up with like the confidence to be vulnerable, I
For
guess.
sure. I mean, and I think that 10 years applies to comedians, and that is comedian specific. I
Okay.
think I've seen juniors, some really great ones, particularly at Hall and Partners and Flamingo,
Mhm.
pick up some wonderful skills within 1 year and lead
Yeah.
presentations, because they wanted to. They
Mm.
embrace learning. They wanted to get better. And, so that joy that some of the juniors bring to their work can be translated. Joy is contagious. And, I think some of these qualities of joy and vulnerability and, of course, intelligence all really matter a lot. And give a smart junior a year, they'll be okay.
And you're talking about emotional impact. Is it important for you to make your audience feel something when you're delivering insights?
Well, I don't think you want to make them feel anything. I
Mm.
think you want to be in the feelings that you have for the work. And I think you want to be in the feelings of enthusiasm. I think it's important to be one enthusiastic, one committed, one vulnerable, like all those things that you bring to it that they will then feel from you.
Mm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I've won a pitch just because someone said, "But you seem so happy. I just wanted to make you happy, and so I gave it to you." That's the only reason why I won the project.
They wanted to make you happy?
Mhm. Because my enthusiasm got the better of me, and the pitch was good. Like I'm sure the design was good because we exceeded the expectations and so forth. But at the end of the day, I'm like because I always ask what tipped the scales in our favor. Like what was that one thing, right? And then they said because you really seemed like you really wanted to do this project with us.
Well, that's your commitment and enthusiasm, and it's clear that they felt something wonderful that you're gonna deliver for them.
But I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think so you being emotional or so invested and sharing that is part of your vulnerability. Is that what you're saying? Is that in one
That's
of your
definitely part of it, definitely
Yeah.
part of it, and it seems like the example you just shared is really beautiful.
Yeah. Would you have another example on your end?
of sharing vulnerability. I think the example of talking about prayer and God for a religious organization was vulnerable on our team's part.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what would be kind of your one parting? Oh, how about I ask it this way? I'm going to switch it. Is there anything, because we're wise now, let's put it this way.
Or
Um,
what?
we're wise. We know things at this point. What is there a piece of advice or wisdom that you wish you knew maybe 10, 15 years ago that you didn't? There's something that you wish you knew earlier on?
I think it gets down to listening.
Hmm.
And I think there's something really good about really listening to people and not speaking so quickly. And I think there's something really good about being comfortable with the pause, particularly with clients and with juniors, because when you allow a pause to take shape and you don't jump in with something right away, you know, something beautiful can come out of that pause. And
Mhm.
there can be real magic in that pause, and not just emotional connection, but perhaps a fantastic insight or something. But I think some good advice or something that's taken me a little bit to learn is to embrace the pause.
Yeah. I think it's also, I would echo that. It's also the fact that this notion, you're not hired to have the answers. You're hired to share to create the learning opportunities for them that they don't have time to, that they don't have the skills for. I think there's something there. You're not hired to have the answers. You're hired to actually help them find the right path forward, which I think the minute I figured that one, I think it stopped being about our skill set, our stuff, our blah blah blah. It's shifted gears to, like I started asking question like to my clients, how can I make you look good? How can I get you promoted? Like we changed and flipped our KPIs from kind of what we do and our like boasting our abilities to, hey, this we got this permanent person promoted. She's like, I have a person that literally she's brought me along her entire career. So I've been next to her with every promotion from like manager all the way to C-suite, which is a beautiful journey. It's one, like I have two. Like I don't have, it doesn't come in many shape and forms, and it's quite privileged and I'm wealthy that way. But I think there's something about, it's about our clients. It's about the people. We're a conduit between two people. It's not about us. I think I would have enjoyed learning that, which I think comes with the silence and sort of taps into that a bit.
Well, I think the fact that you've been taken up to the C-suite by this particular client is a real testament to the quality of your work and the relationship. That's wonderful.
Yeah. I think it's such an honor to be taken to that level and to that room, that table. Yeah. I think it's a great time. I started in this business really early on because it was a shortcut in my mind to get to that table faster.
To get to the C-suite table?
Yeah. In
And
my
what attracts you about being at that table?
impact.
Interesting.
Big questions, big conversations, impact.
Hmm.
Yeah. I like having big conversations. Yeah, big, like the sharper the question, the business side of things. I get
Mhm.
really excited by the business side of things, having
I can
impact.
feel that. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, born and raised by a fiscalist, it happens. Not that I ever wanted to be a CFO. Anywho, so I always, because there's a French background to me, um, that I always sort of finish this with kind of a French twist, which is, you probably know it from James Lipton's Actor Studio, but the original sort of inspiration of those fabulous questions is Bernard Pivot's Bouillon Culture. And so I'm not asking what's your favorite swear word, although it could be your favorite word. I'm but you can feel free to share. It's a safe place. But I always tap into 4 questions, and I ask all sort of podcast guests the same 4 questions, and there's some themes coming through. Are you game to play?
Sure.
Okay, so here we go. So what profession aside from yours would you like to attempt?
Professional athlete.
Of which sport?
I love sports, so I could see myself as a professional surfer, or a professional paddle tennis player. That's not going to happen, but it's a nice fantasy to have.
Wow. Why surfing of all the ones?
I've always been attracted to surfing. I'm terrible at it. I fall off the board and cry, but it's such a beautiful, meditative, and really primal sport. It's just beautiful.
Oh, you've been to Costa Rica, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm like, that's an easy one. Okay. What is your favorite word?
I have a couple. Intuition, I think, is one.
Okay. Because of what it means, or because of, why intuition?
It just speaks to so much, I think.
Okay. It's body and mind coming together, isn't it?
I think so, and maybe even more.
What's the other one?
I like the word dog because I love my dog.
What kind of dog do you have?
I have a Havanese, the dog of Cuba.
Nice. What's his name? Him or her or they? Or...
And he's like a little stoner. He just kind of chills. He's got really shaggy hair and just kind of hangs out. He'd actually be good for the surfing career.
That's perfect. There's a theme. There's a theme. I like it. What's your least favorite word?
I can't stand some of the new language, like intentional, safe space. All that stuff makes me crazy.
Intentional?
Yeah.
I love how they've become buzzwords and are not always used properly either.
They're not used properly at all, and they words. It's so annoying.
Okay.
It's probably just me.
Well, can we add toxic to the list?
Toxic is another one.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. And then my last one is, what is the best thing a mentor has ever imparted on you? Like words of wisdom that still to this day sort of serve as a North Star guiding principle.
Listen, let it fly, trust.
Is it more challenging to trust these days than it used to be?
I think to trust our minds and our creativity, definitely, because as we started off talking about, I think often those muscles are atrophying as we lean towards AI tools, and as we consume so much content, we also lose judgment. So just because someone presents something really well, smiles, is great on camera, has a lot to say, doesn't mean that they're contributing to culture. Just means they're good on camera. So I think like we've lacked a lot of judgment culturally over the past 25 years, and there's a lot of reckonings or difficult times right now. So I think it is hard to trust.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think it's also, I don't know, I personally, sometimes you get burnt a bit as you go through life. Sometimes you get burnt sometimes. And then
in what way? Tell me.
I think you don't have to earn my trust. You can only lose it. Like I'm big on trust. Like I want people to trust me, and I'm trusting. I have faith. And I think to your point, lack of judgment, or maybe over promising, or there is these like, well, LinkedIn became Facebook, but I think we're getting a bit more. Well, let's call a spade. But I think there's some things that are coming through, which is like reality versus LinkedIn. And I think I got caught up in that a bit. Which is someone saying, I think everybody is really good at selling themselves. Not everybody's really good at being accountable and delivering these days.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think there's a bit of a disconnect. Yeah. I don't know. Have you seen that or
Well,
experienced that?
I like LinkedIn, but LinkedIn has also become like a slop house of AI and all these people
Mhm.
sounding very alike with their bullets and their phrasing. And it's just like, stop. And I find that really frustrating. Again, it's the commoditization of
Mhm.
communication.
Yeah.
And so that's frustrating. I haven't had the experience of someone not delivering because I tend to work with people who I've worked with in the past or who I know.
Mm. I think it's Yeah, I think I brought in a few people on my team
Mm,
that were a little bit, yeah. So I think there's a bit of that. Yeah, I don't know. I think trust is an interesting sort of concept these days from a professional life standpoint. Like personally, it's fine, but I think there's a bit of a, yeah, I think it's interesting. And then, our industry is also like faster the better. And I'm like,
I don't know about
um, I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I think that's another podcast episode in and of itself.
go
For
slow.
us. But yeah, I think listening takes time. But I think it's also the fact of perception is everything. So going back to client management, I have basically said it might feel like I'm slowing us down, but we need to think about this now so that we can run later. So let's make sure we're just, you know, figuring out our course and figuring out the weather and planning accordingly our water sort of moments, and then we can really run. I've used that analogy a few times, just to people go, but we want to go. I'm like, yes, but let's just take an extra day or two and then we'll run really fast.
It sounds like you take a very measured and anchored approach in your management of work, and that's probably a great comfort to clients, especially as things are so rocky right now, to have someone who's so anchored.
Well, I hope so. I think some people probably don't, but I hope so. I think it's also the fact that I made a promise to my husband really, really long, like 15 years ago, that I would not work weekends
Okay.
because people in Montreal don't work weekends.
Okay.
The art of marrying a Quebecer, they have a good work-life balance. And so I think it's honoring that promise. I'm 15, like 16 years in. It's pretty good.
That's wonderful.
I think it's also that safeguarding my marriage, my promise to my husband. It's a good North Star.
That could be another podcast, safeguarding my marriage.
As an insights person, yes, such a topic. No, it's true.
I'm
Especially,
serious.
especially for like qualitative researchers. I
Oh,
mean,
completely,
it's a
completely.
lifestyle. Like it's not, plus I own the business and I still
Mhm.
do field work. I mean, I've got
Oh,
2 jobs, forget it. Yeah, no, completely. But maybe not live broadcast.
might help a lot of people, Isabel.
You never know. Anywho, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
us.
you for having me. It's been a delight and really fun.
It's been really lovely. And I think there's some really great gems and nuggets that came out of our conversation to build kind of our learning over the past 3 years. So thank you for that. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, people. Thanks for tuning in to Insightful Inspiration, your trusted market research podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with your network, and we'd love it if you could leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. For more on this episode and others, head over to celesco.com. And remember, insight isn't just about what we uncover, it's how we let it shape our actions. Until next time, stay curious, be kind, and keep seeking inspiration. We'll see you soon.